Welcome to 10 Questions with PMR. Each month, I'm going to look at the prior month's questions that are posted on YouTube in the comments section and answer them. So here we go. Our first question is 10 frames per second enough for sport photography? Absolutely, yes, definitely. Now, there's a caveat though. If you're not shooting with A9, A9 II, A9 III, or Alpha 1, you need to be in mechanical shutter for sure. If you try to use the A7R5, for instance, in electronic shutter and shoot sports, it's going to be really bad. There'll be all kinds of jello and rolling shutter. You don't want that. If you switch to mechanical, most of it will go away. Not all of it, but most of it will go away. It'll be acceptable. 10 frames a second is plenty fast for sports photography. Remember, just a few years ago, Canon's and Nikon's flagship cameras only went 10 frames per second for sports. So it wasn't until Sony came along with the a6000 at 11 frames per second in 2015, if you can believe that, that they were one-upped by a little mirrorless camera. It was kind of a funny situation. I shot that camera back in the day, but that's for another video. Very good question, though. Remember, too, that I also shoot tennis. When I'm shooting tennis singles, I'm in single frame. When I'm shooting batters, I'm shooting single frame. So there are certain sports that just really lend itself to shooting single frame. When I'm shooting somebody on a tee box from mid fairway with a 600, I'm looking back up at the tee, I'm going to shoot single frame there because I'm going to have a better chance of using my brain and my fingertips and my muscle memory of capturing that ball off the club head than I will doing the pray and spray thing at 30 or even 60 frames a second. Now at 120, yeah, you could probably do it, but then you have to edit it. So boy, I'd avoid that at all costs. When I got serious about creating my YouTube studio, I knew I needed a solution for LED lighting. Westcott's L60Bs are fantastic and are the perfect blend of power, control, and price point. Next question is, punching in only works in JPEG, not RAW, right? Wrong. It works great. And if you don't know what we're talking about, punching in is where you can configure a button. I use the focus hold button on the side of the lenses. And so that when I hit that button, it'll zoom from a full frame sensor down to APS-C. So you get a 1.5x, basically a built-in teleconverter with no loss of light, which is really cool. And that's what they're talking about. That'll work great in RAW. So even if you only shoot RAW, not RAW plus JPEG, you will still get the ability to punch in on the cameras. Next question, what picture profile do you use on a normal day? I typically don't. I turn profiles off under normal shooting. So if I'm doing portraits or anything like that, or just photojournalism or landscape photography, I don't really use picture profiles too much. Now, the exception is when I'm at a noon start, very bright, sunny football game. Then it's really tough because all the light's coming down the helmets, the faces are dark, you got to go inside the helmet to find them. In that situation, I will use something called S-Cinetone S or Picture Profile 11 on the Alpha 1, A9 III, and A9 II. So Picture Profile 11 is your friend if you got a really contrasty situation that you know you're going to do battle with in post. S-Cinetone S is your friend. So, and this has to do with the next question as well, which is how can I configure S-Cinetone to be used for stills, and it's PP11. Now, I can't remember going back to like A9 and back if it's 11 or 10. It seems like in my memory it might be 10. Check your owner's manual or go online to Sony's website and you can find out. Next question, do you still use the same settings now in the Alpha 1 for shooting sports? For the most part, yes, I do. And my go-to setting, please, this is a great place to start if you're not sure what you're doing or if you just got the camera new. Go to all the way to the bottom of the AF areas, and when you hit the bottom, now you can go left and right, and those are all the tracking autofocus settings. That is the only one you want to use. I prefer tracking flexible spot M or medium. I shoot virtually 99% of everything I do is tracking flexible spot M. Now there are times when I'll use S, and that's usually when I'm using a 600 f4 with a teleconverter or a 400-2.8 with a 2x. And that's just because I want to distinguish something very far away from that it's standing in front of something that's pretty close to the background. So, but normally that setting works great for everything I do. Portraits, landscape, whatever. So good, very good question again. Any suggestions on changing the display quality? I have a lens on the A1 and it doesn't give me an option to choose anything. Yes, there's a reason for that, and it's the camera's not broken and you haven't done anything wrong, but you've got, there's two settings that are right next to each other in the Alpha 1, and let's take a look at those right now. So in the display quality setting, you can see it's set for high. Now if I go back down to standard frame rate, if I change to high or high plus, let's say I choose high, notice that the display quality setting is grayed out. So I can no longer set that. So you have to choose between frame rate quality, or you must go to standard and then go to increase it. So you can get high, and high is best. You know, look, if you're going to use the A1 for doing landscape work, which is great, a 50 megapixel file and great in low light, it's a perfect camera for landscape work. You'll want that display quality on the highest setting possible. But if you're shooting sports, like so many of us do, you really will want to go with standard so that you can get the higher frame rates available. Now, why would you want to do that? Certain sports have incredibly fast action. Like if you're shooting an F1 race and you're standing next to the track and you're trying to pan an F1 car coming by in a straightaway and it's going 100, 200 miles an hour, you really will not be able to do a good job. You won't be able to keep the car in the proper part of the frame unless you're on the extreme fast frame rate, which would be here. You really need that setting. So the higher frame rate speed. For most sports though, you know, high is going to do great. And that's probably where you want. So what you'll find is most people shooting A1 sports are going to be on the standard setting for quality, and they're going to be high or high plus depending on the sport they're using. Very, very good question. There's nothing wrong with the camera. You're doing fine. Just depending on what work you're doing will dictate how you do your settings. Any advice for extending the battery life of this camera? This is the new A1 user. Compared to my A7 III, the battery life is atrocious. I'm not sure I'd use atrocious, but yeah, it's definitely different. The A7 III is, first of all, a 24 megapixel camera versus a 50 megapixel for the A1 versus A7 III. The A7 III can only go 10 frames per second in either electronic or mechanical shutter, whereas the Alpha 1 can go up to 30 frames per second in an electronic shutter. But the last reason is the one you probably wouldn't think about, and that is the EVF display quality. We were just talking about this in the last question, but the EVF is about the greatest draw there is in the camera when it's turned on. And one little note that I'll make is that if you carry the camera around your neck, okay, all the time, and the camera's on, it is firing the EVF at all times. So if you go to a like a Black Rapid strap system, you can then turn the camera this way, and now if it's on your side like this, it will be firing the back display instead of the EVF. So anytime you can turn the EVF off is a good thing, okay, on any of the Sony cameras. And most of us disable the chimping feature where it shows you the preview. You just turn preview off. If you want to preview, the best way to preview is in the EVF, of course, and not in the back. So the A7 III has a lower quality set EVF than the Alpha 1. And so on Alpha 1, you've got the great EVF quality. You've got the high-speed motor drive at 30 frames a second, and then you've got a 50 megapixel sensor. So yes, it's going to be naturally going to consume more energy than the A7 III that you're used to. Why do you still use back button focus even as you're using tracking autofocus? Boy, I get asked this all the time, and I probably really need to do a video only on back button focus so I can really explain it to people. It is the choice of better than 95% of sports photographers around the world. We all use it, not just because we're old or because we have muscle memory. Here's the thing about back button focus and why there's an advantage. Because you're still able to make a picture while you're not autofocusing. If you rely upon the shutter release button to also activate autofocus, whenever your finger is off the shutter release button, you can't take a picture. But when you're doing function 4 or back button focus, what will allow you to do is you can lift off and not shoot, but you can still focus. So you can track action through an obstacle, like a big referee's butt or something like that. And then on the other side, you can reacquire and shoot. So sometimes you have to rely on zone focusing to make a shot. Whereas if you're using the shutter release, lingering on something that's not what you want will cause the camera to flip to it, and then you've lost your subject entirely. The easiest example of this is in basketball. You got somebody driving towards the net, and you're tracking them with back button focus, and then all of a sudden the referee slides in front of you on their way past you. When the butt is past you and the zebra's gone, all of a sudden they might be in a range where you could shoot, but you're not even acquired yet again, and you haven't reacquired the autofocus. And so basically, if you are using shutter release for also activating autofocus, by default you're missing pictures, and that's a problem. So we want to miss as little as we possibly can in sports photography, and that's why virtually all sports photographers use back button focus. Next question is, I'm finding the AF speed on the 300 GM is much faster than my 400 GM. Am I crazy, or is there something wrong with my 400? There's nothing wrong with your 400. The 300 GM is speedy, speedy, speedy. It is lightning fast. It's faster than 600 f4, the 2 to 6, the 400 GM, all those lenses. I was shooting tracking on long jump, as I always do, and when the athletes would land in the pit and all the sand would come up, as soon as the face and eyes were blocked from the camera's ability to see those things, it would immediately go to the sand. And it was a problem because the sand would then drop, and then I'd see reaction of the continuation of them falling in the pit. And I didn't like it. I wanted to stay with the face autofocus. And so what I did is I changed from 4 autofocus sensitivity from 4 down to 2 on the A9 III. And that was enough to retard the autofocus speed so that it would stay on the face even as the sand covered the frame. So I've never had to turn down the autofocus speed on the 6 or the 4 ever. And so, yeah, the 300-2.8 is wicked fast. Also, I think it's important to mention this. You know, the 2x teleconverter has kind of a bad rap. I just did a video on that a couple days ago, and using it with the 300-2.8. I would tell you that in my opinion, the 2x on the 300 on the A9 III is about the same speed autofocus as the 600 f4. It's quick. So yes, there's nothing, you're not seeing anything, and there's nothing wrong with your 4. It's just they're just getting better and better and better, as they always do. Sony is always advancing. They're always marching forward, and it's never more evidence than in the 300-2.8 GM. Next question is, do you change any of your AF settings when you're shooting with the new 300 GM? I kind of just covered that question in the last one. The only thing I would say is that I do, even using the 300 as a prime lens at 300 millimeter, when I was shooting distance runners, like the 5,000 meter, it's very nice to use the extra small setting now available on the A9 III to pick out one face in a group of runners and then be able to recompose at will and then track only that face. That's pretty nice, but otherwise, no. That tracking flexible spot medium works so well for me in virtually every part of photography that I do. Remember, if you have questions about anything regarding sports photography, feel free to ask me, even if it's about Nikon or Canon. I mean, I've shot both of those brands in the past, though Sony's my future. I'm happy to tackle anything if I can. Thanks so much for watching.